Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to my newest Django tutorial series. And the latest version of Django is actually 1.10. And that's going to be the version that we use in this tutorial. So it's currently the end of 2016, and this is the latest version of Django. And we're going to be using Python 3.5. So if you've never gotten started with Python programming, I recommend that you check out my Python for Beginners tutorial. It's actually gotten some pretty good reviews out of the gate. It's a good idea that you have some idea of how to program in Python before moving on to Django, and it's just like you don't necessarily need to have a ton of Python knowledge, but you should be able to at least scratch the surface with Python. So I feel like with my tutorial series, and I'll put the link in the description tab of this video, that you should just be able to get up to speed relatively quickly. And I'm pulling it up right now on YouTube so I can show you guys. It's this series here, and this just kind of goes over all the basic syntax of the language. Now, one of the important features, though, is that the install of Python. So you have to have Python installed on your machine in order for it for you to be able to continue with this tutorial series. So I would follow the advice from tutorial 1 here, where you go ahead and set up and install Python. We're going to use Visual Studio Code as an editor, which I also use for that tutorial series. And this is a free product from, believe it or not, Microsoft. I'm not a Microsoft fanboy, but this is one of the best text editors out there right now. It's completely free. It's cross-platform. It'll work on Mac, Linux, and Windows. And the best part is it is free. So when you download and install this, you're going to want to install the Python debugging tool from Don Jayamane, which is right here in this image. And there's instructions on how to do all that in my Python beginner tutorial series. So just make sure you follow all that, so that way we have an editor up and running and we have Python installed on the machine. The one final note is I will tell you that when you go through the install process, make sure you click the drop down box when you're setting up. It'll ask you if you want the basic settings or if you want to customize it or something along those lines. But just make sure you look at that, because there is a checkbox that says add Python to your path. And the people that didn't do that, and they end up running into a situation where Windows doesn't know how to execute Python programs, and it creates a problem. So there's a little checkbox that'll say add Python to your path. Make sure that is checked, and then you should have no problems. So yeah, definitely follow along with that series before continuing to this one. It shouldn't take you too long, like literally a day's worth of probably programming. If even that, you could probably get up to speed, or at the very least, kind of bounce back and forth. Now, one of the things I did in this series is I actually had a lot of different videos, and one of the things I'm going to try to experiment with this tutorial series compared to one of my other ones is that I'm going to try to put everything in one long video, if at all possible. And that may not end up working out because, unfortunately, schedules and things like that. So I'll see what I can do. This Django 1.9 series is my last series that I did, which also had some pretty decent reviews. So that one was broken up into multiple modules, so we're going to kind of compare and see how well they do. The reason why you want to use Django is, number one, it's a framework that's been around for a long time. It's completely written in Python, so if you know how to program in Python, you'll know how to use Django. Django is just Python code, but it saves you a lot of hassle for your typical website development needs. This website, hipstercode.com, is the site that I owned. I created it for my tutorials and my blogs, but it's all Python that's being executed here, and it's just it's a framework that is very, very nice. It's easy to use. Eventually you'll get the hang of it, and like I said, I think it'll definitely grow on you. Now, it's not the flavor of the week splash type of thing that you see in the JavaScript community, but there's also a lot of controversy and conflict and just madness going on in JavaScript right now. So while you can use Node.js if you want for your server, Python and Django is not going anywhere anytime soon, because it just solves the needs of website developers very, very effectively. So anyway, I chose Hipster Code to be written in Python because of the security, because I needed to do a lot of things. I mean, I have a situation where I have people that can log in and out of the site. I have logins through social media platforms, like you can log in through each one of these major social networks, or you can just simply set up your own username and password. So there's a lot of things that I wanted to do that Django provides out of the box. Another thing too is Django has a completely working admin system that will come with your application out of the box too, and you'll see that that's pretty nice. The database for storing all of your data, you have different options with Django. Most people use MySQL or Postgres. In fact, I would say most people are using Postgres now, and that's actually what I'm using for hipster code. But you can also use a built-in database server that Python includes, which they call SQLite. So in this series, though, we are going to be looking at getting set up with Postgres, just because that is something that you need to do in order to have a production website. So I'm assuming eventually you want to take your website into the real world and have people use it. And at that point, you want to have a true database system like Postgres or MySQL. So another video you want to check out in order to get Postgres installed on your system if you're using Windows is you can check out this video. It's the same thing is going to apply for Windows 10, but you need to have Postgres installed. And Postgres comes with a tool called pgadmin 3, which I haven't run this in a while, but this will allow us to actually view our database much easier. So when you have Postgres installed, you're going to end up having this server that you're going to double click on, and then you provide your password. And I think mine's test123 because it's just a local password. But then you can see all my databases in here, and these are databases that I've done for different tutorials and things. But this is also another thing that you're going to need to do in order to be able to build a website that can go into production like hipster code. So definitely follow along in that video. I know that there's a lot of prerequisites, but if you want to have success with Django, especially doing something that is production ready and real world ready, then it's definitely something that is necessary. So first things first, we need a folder to actually put all of our projects in. In fact, I have a folder on my C drive, so I go under C, and then I have projects. Projects. I have something called a folder called tutorials, I believe. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder for this tutorial, which I'm going to call Django 1.10 tutorial. All right, so I know that's kind of a long name, but that's the name of the folder that I'm going to have that stores this, and that's not going to be our project name, but that is where everything's going to be. So let me double click on this folder so I can go into it, and then I can use the shortcut in Windows where if I just replace this with CMD, it's going to launch our command line. Now if you type Python, it should, if you've installed everything correctly, it should launch Python 3.5.2 or whatever version you have. And you can press Control-C to get out of that, but that tells you that Python's working. So this is the Python emulator where you can quickly run Python code. I'm running Python. So I'm just, it actually executed Python code by the Python interpreter. And that's how you know it's running. So now Python 3.5 actually comes with a thing called virtual environment by default. And the reason why we want to use that is because anytime you set up a project, you want to make sure that any modules or third-party libraries and code that you're using for your Django project, you want to make sure that they do not conflict with other projects that you might have running. So in order to successfully do that, we use this thing called virtual environment, which is part of Python by default. It's relatively easy to use but hard to wrap your head around. But we use that, like I said, to isolate our projects. So that way when we have multiple projects, there's no code that they share that conflicts and breaks things. Because I'm telling you, if you want to have a bad time, have a project with shared libraries and modules and stuff. It is a nightmare. So although some newbie tutorials might not cover this right out of the gate, it's just something you want to try to get your head around it as quickly as possible. All you have to do is say virtual env, and then you're going to, the next argument after you say virtual env, you're going to do a space, and then that's going to be, the next thing we put in here is going to be the name of the environment. I like to say env, which is just environment for short. It could be whatever name you want. I would suggest something short, or I would suggest just doing env. That way you can follow right along and you don't run into any problems. And the only other thing that you need to add is we're going to do 2 hyphens and say no site flags. So what that means is that if there's no conflict within your project, say you had a module that was installed on your Python system, and it's a module that's accessible to all projects. If it was version 1.2, so if you had two projects that were using version 1.2, they would share that global one because they're like, hey, it doesn't have to be unique. But this no site flag says don't ever do that. Just install that module over again in your virtual environment. It's just better to do it that way. I've been doing too much Node.js development lately. It's actually no site packages. My bad. All right, so this is going to go across the web. It's going to install your local setup, which means that it basically is like a separate Python installation on your machine. And once we have it installed, we need to go into our environment folder. You can see that it got created for us. So if we cd into that folder, you can see all these different items. In fact, let's look at it in our Explorer. You can see env was created, and it has all these different things like lib. This is all the standard library of Python. Scripts is how we're going to activate our virtual environment, and then include, lib and then site packages are where all the little projects are going to go. So when we install Django in our virtual environment, it's going to go inside of here. So let's go ahead and activate the virtual environment, because that's the first thing we need to do when we create one in order to be able to use it. So we're going to go into the scripts folder, and here we're going to run that activate. Now on the left hand side, you're going to notice, like prepended to this this command line, you have the env, which is the name of the virtual environment. And that's how you know that the virtual environment is active in this window. So that means as long as we keep this command prompt open, the virtual environment will be activated. So what does that really mean? It means that when we use an installer to install Django, it's going to install it locally to this project. So let's go ahead and do that now. We're going to say pip install Django. Now this is going to reach across the web. It's going to download, like you can see it says Django 1.10, so that's the latest version of Django. It automatically tries to find the Django that matches up to whatever Python installation you have. Hopefully you're using Python 3.5. And this should just take just a few minutes here, but it's a few megs of data that needs to be downloaded and then installed. And once again, if we go back to our folder and we go into lib and site packages, the Django folder, you can see it's already there and it's being downloaded right now. But you can see that this Django is all local. So if you use different libraries and things like that, it's all going to be installed locally, assuming that you run it from your virtual environment. Once again, this saves you so much hassle in the long run. So make sure we're in the main folder of our application, which is this long name that I made. And now we're going to actually create our Django project. And in order to do that, Django comes with a built-in, what it's called a command line operator, which is basically just a little executable file that says how to create projects and things like that. So the first thing that we want to do is we're going to say Django admin.py, and we're going to say start project and then the name of our project. So we'll call this project, we'll make it like a book site basically. So we'll just call it book. I'll call it book. All right, so now, all right, let me see. So now, all right, so that didn't work as well as I wanted. Let me see something here. I'm going to type Django admin. I want to see what this thing pulls up. So you can see that it does know what Django admin is. And here's our start project. So we'll try to say Python first then. We'll say Python Django admin start project. Nope, can't do it. All right, so this is our first bug here. So Windows is actually asking me how to execute. I'm just going to say Python, I guess. Alright, so this appears to be a Windows bug that is the virtual environment can't find the local installed version. So what we're going to do And I want to show you what I'm doing here so that there's no magic or anything, in case you guys are curious. Inside environment, if we look in lib and then we look at site packages where Django got installed, like I was telling you guys, if we double click on Django, and inside the bin folder of Django, there's a Django admin, and that's actually the Django admin that we're trying to execute in order to create our project with the locally running Python version. So we're going to actually try to spell out the exact location to where that file is in order to use it. So what I'm going to say is Python, and then that way it runs the local version of Python. And I'm going to say Python env lib site packages Django / was it bin / Django admin.py, and we're going to say start project, just like we did before. So space start project and then space. We're going to call this book. Alright, so now if we do, you can see that it actually worked. That's a little bit of a temporary bypass. I know that was a lot of typing, but all we simply did was we laid out the exact path to where Django admin could be found. Luckily, we only have to do that once when we're starting our project. Everything from there should be fine. So now if we dir into the directory here, you can see we have the book folder which got created for us. And let's open that up in our folder. So we go back and we look at book. And inside of book, you can see that we have these basically these initial setup files, and these are the standard by default Django setup files that get created when we start a new project. So let's use our Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to create a new window here, and I want to open a folder, and we're going to double click on the Django, and I want to click on the book. Actually, you know what? I'm going to click on this, the main project folder. So this will take just a second, but now if we look at our files, you can see that we can actually open them. It has all the Django code inside of it. I'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit. One thing I want to note is that you need to have your extensions installed. So you should have this Don JMain Python extension installed if you followed the tutorial series for my beginner Python series. So make sure you have that installed. We could even search other extensions too to see if there's any helpful ones. I'm not sure if there's any Django helpful ones out there. Looks like these are just Django template ones, but yeah, I'm not interested in that right now. So anyway, click on this to go back to our documents. And Python is a MVC type of application or framework, so we'll get into that in just a moment here. But the URLs actually says how your how Django finds pages that you're requesting. That's all done with the URLs, and you have to have a URLs file. Settings is like the dashboard of your entire application. So this is, if you've ever done ASP.NET, it's like your web config, but it's essentially all the special items that you list. Like there's certain things, like in order to connect to your database, by default it's using SQLite, like I was telling you, the built-in Django or Python database, but this is where we'll set up MySQL and Postgres and all that. So there's just a lot of information inside the settings file that we're not going to get into right now. WSGI is how Python interfaces to like web servers. So web servers are like Apache or Nginx. I mean, but they use this. They use WSGI in order for any sort of Python application to run on the web and run with web servers. Manage is a built-in, like it's almost like Django admin, but it's going to be what we use a lot more often than Django admin in order to do things like building our databases and stuff like that. All right, so what I want to show you now is how we actually run our Django server. And we're going to go to the main directory here. I want to cd into the book directory, so that way we can see our manage.py file. And now we're going to actually run that. We're going to say Python manage.py, and we're going to say run server. So now it tells us that we have a server listening at 127.0.0.1, colon 8000. So that is the local host address. That's actually how you can run websites locally that can't be accessed from outside the outside world. So you can't like host an application like this, but you can view it on your own website. So now we can see that Django is installed and that it is working. Now go ahead and say /admin. And I want to show you that it comes with this built-in Django administration system. And this is actually really cool. So if we look at this, if we look at the command line, you can see that it's actually logging out all the requests that are being handled. And you can see that all this stuff is actually associated with the admin. So how did all that work? The Django project has this admin's URL, which is actually including, it's doing an import right here. So it says from Django contrib. So if you ever wanted to look at that code that's being imported and used right here, then you would have to go into the folder and go to the site packages folder inside Django, and then if you remember it was contrib admin, and then all these files are actually Django or Python code that makes the Django admin work. So the first things first, the good news is that we actually have the web server working, so that's pretty awesome. And let's go ahead and go back to the main directory. And I want to actually stop the server at this point because we're going to actually create our first database, and we're going to use the built-in database by default. So if we go to settings, you can see that it uses SQLite. So you can actually use SQLite in production, but it's not going to be something that you would want to use for like a large website. But let's go ahead and do that now. So we're going to say Python manage.py, and we're going to say create sorry, it's been a little while, I forgot what the command was. It's actually create super user, all one word. So you do this the first time you create a Django project, and it's going to tell you that you need to set up a user, but at this point it's not actually working because we need to create our database table. So the first thing I guess we're going to do now is say Python manage.py, and we're going to say make migrations, all one word. And now we're going to say migrate. Now this goes through and it creates all these database tables for us in SQLite. So now that the database tables are created, we're going to press up on the arrow key so we can go back to our create super user, and we're going to execute that command. Now it's going to ask you about the username, and I'm just going to say my username is I'll say admin, and I'll leave the email address blank, I don't really care. And then my password is going to be test123, test123, which is obviously a terrible password. Oh, it's too short, damn it. I'll say testing 1 2 3. Oh, I messed that up. Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. Oh, they didn't match. Oh my God. testing 1 2 3. testing 1 2 3. Alright, I don't know why I was having dysfunction there. So the super user was created. So what does that mean? It means that if we go ahead and run our server, we're going to say Python manage.py run server. So pull up your website address again, and now we'll say /admin. And now if we go ahead and log in with, I said admin and I said testing 1 2 3 and press enter, you can see that, hey admin, and it tells you the last time, well actually there's not much to view here, but we have our users. So you can see my admin user, that's me. I can go ahead and update my first and last name and my email address, noobniche@gmail.com. And This is actually where you can assign specific user access roles and rights and everything to every user that's registered to your site. Right now, we only have one user registered, and that's the admin, that's me. You can see I have this green check mark for staff status, but for websites where we have users and things like that, you're going to have different levels of permissions. You can also create groups so that you can just have roles associated with groups. So you can assign permissions to groups and then assign people to groups instead of having to deal with permissions for each and every person. You can just have different groups. So that is actually a hugely helpful, beneficial thing that Django comes with out of the box. And I'll tell you, I've been doing Django now for closer to a decade than 0 years, and I still there's nothing in Node or anything like that that comes close to the convenience of this that I've seen anyway. Not without a bunch of hassle. So let's go ahead and go back to our main application page. All right, so what I want to do is go ahead and make some changes to our application. So inside of our book folder, inside Visual Studio Code, I'm going to go ahead and create this new file icon. And we're going to create a new file called views.py. And views are just Python functions or methods. Well, actually, they're functions. And if you want to know the difference between a method and a function, definitely check out the Beginner Python series that I have. But inside the views, this is actually what gets executed anytime a call is made to your server. The URLs tell Django how to communicate with those views, and that's what we're going to do right here. The interesting thing is that Django uses something called regular expressions, and they go back to the days of Perl programming, and they're very cryptic looking things, but basically little symbols mean certain things in regular expressions in order to match text. So follow word for word what I'm doing here. I'm saying URL, and what it's doing is using the built-in URL that's imported from our Django project from the config URLs folder, and we're using it here. And then we pass in this regular expression, and what the caret sign means, that's a caret sign, that means the beginning must match, and this dollar sign means the end must match. And since nothing is in between these two characters, it means match nothing. So, or match everything, basically. It means match nothing, actually. I'm sorry. That's what it means. I'll explain that in just a moment. So now what I want to do is I want to put a comma after that, and inside of single quotes, I'm going to actually reference book, which stands for the book folder, the module here. I'm going to say .views, which is the views file that we created, and then we're going to say index. Index is short for like the home page. Make sure you also put a comma, because every URL you have needs to be separated by a comma. That's what we did there. So now we need to create a method. Damn it, I'm getting my terminology messed up. We need to create a function under the views file called index. So we're going to say define index. And the first argument to all Django views is that a request object must be passed in, because every time a request is made, the request contains things like the user's IP address, the browser that they're using, the data that gets posted when they try to send it to the server, all kinds of stuff like that. So it's really important. It doesn't work without it. You have to have it. So let's go ahead and say define index, and then we're just going to simply return something called render, and we're going to send back the request. And then the next argument we're going to have here is we're going to have our templates, and that's simply it. That's all we're going to return there. Now, since we're using this render, this is part of the Django project that needs to be imported. So we're going to say from Django.shortcuts, and this is just areas of the Django code that is so used, it's used so often that they have shortcuts for it. So render is just shorthand for basically send back a template. Now that brings up an interesting point. We need to have a templates folder in order to actually have templates to be rendered. So inside the main, let me think here. Yeah, inside the main book folder, so you'll notice that there's book, and then there's also book inside of here. There's also this SQLite file that got created when we created our database. But make sure inside this regular book, we're going to create a new folder. So not in the internal book folder, but this book. I'll show you guys in just a second. I'm going to create a templates folder. And let's pull up the Windows Explorer so you can see. So we have book, and then there's a second book, and that's what I was telling you about. Make sure the templates is in this outermost book, because that's where it's going to hold all of our templates. And we're going to now create a template for this index.html. So let's go ahead and create that now. So we're going to say index.html. This is just standard HTML, so we're going to do a hello world. I'm running Django 1.10. This is your typical intro to programming hello world statement. Alright, so now that we've done that, we need to go ahead and modify our settings folder or file inside of our project to actually tell it where the templates folder can be found. So let's go ahead and pull up the settings.py, and then here you can see that there is this templates, and this is actually saying this DIRS directory right here needs to actually be where the templates can be found. So what we're going to do, we're just going to give a, let me see here, we're just going to give it a root path. So I'm trying to think about the best way to do this. If we scroll up to the top of the settings file, you'll see that there is this base directory that's being set. And I'm interested to see what the output of this is, because I actually don't know. So I'm going to copy this statement right here. And what I want to do is pull up the Django shell. So really what I need to do is I'm going to say Python import Django. Actually, no, I didn't even need to do any of that. I'm going to say import OS, and I'll just paste in that code. So this is file, not found. Okay, no file. Hell. Alright, so you know what? What we can do is, this is another way we can do it. I'm going to say print base dir. So I'm curious what this output is, because this is going to dictate how I actually set up my templates. So let's go ahead and, I want to run the server again. Alright, so I'm trying to see if it actually... Alright, so you can see when I did the run server that it did... Okay, so that's the good... So see this directory right here? Projects, tutorial, Django. So we know that this will lead us to the directory of where this this first books folder is. So hopefully you guys are following along. This isn't a huge deal as long as you're just copying what I'm writing. But I can use base directory here. I just didn't know what the output was. And that's one way of finding out. So I can say base directory. And I'm going to go down to my templates, and inside this directory here, I'm going to say base directory plus, and then I'm going to say /templates. And what I'm doing is I'm giving it the location to where the templates file can be found. So let's go ahead and run the server again. Alright, so now I'm going to go to this page, and it did not work because I have errors. So this error is actually complaining about the way that we called or identified the URL inside of our views. And it's complaining about this in Django in older versions. In fact, everything before this latest version, you used to be able to... Sorry about that, my phone rang. But you used to be able to call it this way in the older versions, and now you can't do that anymore. So what we need to do is actually say from book import views, and we'll just say as book views. And now I can say down here book views.index. So I'm basically importing this entire views file and then referencing index. There's actually a cleaner way of doing it. The older version, like I said, is kind of like a more sloppy version, but It's not bad that they're forcing this on us. We need to press Control C to try to kill the server and then run it again. And now it looks like it's running fine. Alright, so now we actually have a working template directory, so that's good news. Alright, so the next thing we want to set up in our project is actually a folder that's right next to the templates folder, not inside of it, but next to it, and we're going to call this the static folder. So we're going to call this static. And inside static, we're not going to worry about anything for right now, but now we need to hit Google and look for a free Bootstrap template. So if we go to the Start Bootstrap, there's a free site. We can go ahead and we'll just grab this. You know what? Actually, I think I've seen that one before, and it's way too friggin' big. We'll go ahead and we'll just do this one. I know this one works relatively well. So just click download. And what we're going to want to do is all the contents of this, all the CSS and vendor, all this stuff here, we want to go ahead and extract that. And we need to find the location of our projects. We're going to go projects. I have mine under tutorials, Django 1.10 tutorial. Go into static and just make sure the static folder is selected. Click OK, and then we're going to click OK. So all those folders got downloaded there. Now we want to take the index and we want to extract that one. If you do the drop down, if you're using the 7-zip, I think this is what this is. I can go here, I'm going to resolve static and replace that with templates and say yes. So now my index, if we check this out, my index is now going to have a lot more stuff in it. So it has all this stuff from the free theme. Now here, what happens if I go ahead and go back to my application? You can see it's all running and everything, but one of the things you'll notice if we inspect and we look at the Chrome console, you can see all these static files are not being found. So that means that we need to set up our static file handler within Django so that it knows how to actually handle all these static. And we basically do the same thing. We have to point to a directory where our static files are located. So let's go back to our settings and look for something that says static. So here you can see the static URL. And the static URL needs to be the same thing that we had for our templates. So let's go here and we're going to paste this. Go all the way down here. And we're going to paste that and replace templates with static. So now if we go inside of our templates, or the main index template, we want to go ahead and use something at the top of the file. We need to say load static files. And this needs to be, this is actually using Django's template language, but you need to use these curly braces and say load static files. And this allows us to use our shortcut, which we're going to see in just a moment. In order, instead of having to spell out the exact location, we can actually tell Django to say static, and then you give it the path that needs to be found, and then just like that. So basically, use this static keyword, and then inside a single quote, you actually give it the path, but you don't have to give it the full path. You just have to say CSS, because it knows when you say static, it's going to look inside the static folder, which it's then going to look inside the CSS folder at this point, and then it's going to find the creative.css.min. So let's go ahead and see if this works real quick. Alright, so it looks like our server crashed. Static URL must end with a slash. Okay. So let's pull up the settings again. Okay. And run our server again. Alright, so we're still not getting the outcome that we want. So you can see right here, it's still not finding it. And it's clearly looking in the wrong location. Alright, so I just ran into a situation where I had to look this up because this actually changed in the newest version. Make sure you put this in the bottom here. We have our static URL, which is actually the URL that it points to. And then we also have static file directory. So this is the base directory that we've already defined at the top plus the static folder. And then in our index where we said load static files, you need to say load static. So they changed that. So instead of static files, they changed it to static. So we need to go through every spot of our template here and replace anything that like vendor is pointing to vendor over here. We need to update that by saying, you know, copying this pattern here. And it's really just a shortcut so that Django knows how to actually find the file. So I'm just going to copy that part. And I'm going to update all these parts here that require this. So just like that, we're going to go through and update all these static locations. Hopefully there's not a ton. So there are some images down here, so make sure you update those too. I hate how my editor always tries to put two apostrophes right after each other when I don't want them to do that. There's probably a setting that I can adjust, but it would take me more time to figure that out than just dealing with it. So as you can see, I'm just going through and updating all these locations here. It's getting kind of old though. Alright, let's go just a couple more. I actually did one down here while I was testing. And don't do it on this one. I want to make sure the local files that we need to point to that we're doing this. Alright, so make sure your server is running. Alright, so if we go to the main page and we refresh, so now we have the working template. So obviously the website looks a lot better now than it did before because of all the CSS and everything that was included. So that was kind of a hassle. I apologize for any sort of skipping around there because that was just some of that stuff was newer Django stuff that I wasn't familiar with. Alright, so now since our application is about books, this is going to be essentially like a blog website that talks about books. I have no interest in actually doing that, but we're just going to call it Book Spot so we can update some of our template and everything to reference our page name. All right, and you'll notice here that we have a few pages like about. So let's go ahead and create some of these, this about page. Let's go ahead and do that. So how do we do that? We know we go to the URLs number one, and we can go like this and just copy this line. And then inside of here, we're going to say about. But then we need a forward slash here. Django by default puts a forward slash on the end. But here, this is how we can do about. Go like this. And now we'll go ahead and add an endpoint for our about page. All right, so now we need to add an about template. And we're just going to copy this entire template here, and we'll add a new one. We'll say about.html, and we'll paste this in. So we're basically duplicating the entire thing. And we'll change the title at the top. We'll say about. And instead of all this stuff, let's go ahead and just, we're going to get rid of all this stuff down here. Actually, no, there isn't like an about page here. Let's get rid of some of these sections that we don't need. Keep in mind we're editing the about page here. So look, see, this is actually already an about right here, so we'll just keep that. And we'll keep the header. We don't care about the spelling errors, but let's go ahead and refresh. And now if we click on about, it takes you to the about page, and you can see about us. So that's actually how you change the different pages and everything. If we click on the home page, it doesn't do anything. So let's make it go back to the home page by going to the about and go up to this navigation where it actually has this area right here. This is the link to go back to the top, and we need to give it an href of just the forward slash. So that'll be our root directory. So that way it'll go back. And I want to show you something interesting here. That if we go here and we're on the about page and we click this, it'll take us back to the home page. But if we were on some other page, it wouldn't take us back to the home, because this is only on the about.html. So one of the important things about Django is that you can use template inheritance in order to have, so you can reuse a lot of this code without having to duplicate it everywhere. So let's go ahead and do that now. We're going to say layout.html, and layout is going to take the entire index here, and we're going to paste it in. Actually, I'm going to take that back. I'm going to take the about page and paste that into the layout. And where this section is right here, we're going to do something. We're going to say block content, and then just say end block. Okay. Alright, so that's our layout page. Now on our about, we're going to get rid of everything in the about, and we're going to paste in that section from the about, but we need to put it inside the blocks. We're going to say end block. And at the top, we'll say block content. So now what we're telling Django here is we're saying anything inside this block content, you're going to put inside of the layout section here. So that way about doesn't have to have all that other garbage that you don't need, because it can be reused. Now in order for the about to actually use the layout page, we need to actually tell it to use this this layout. So we're going to go to the top here, and first things first, we need to say extends, and we'll just give it the layout.html. So we're telling it extends, and we also have to say load static, just like we did on the home page. You always want to say load static, and that should always be under your extends if you're extending any sort of layout page. So watch how this works now. So we go to the about page and it works the exact same way. So now let's go ahead and fix the index page in order to also use the layout as well. So we can get rid of we're just going to copy, no, I'm actually going to keep this. So we're going to get rid of all this stuff that we're using, that we're reusing from the layout page. And once again, we're going to say extends layout.html. And since we already have an about page here, I'm going to get rid of the about section. Oh, it looks like we already did. Alright, so that'll work. Alright, so now we're using all this template reuse, so we can get rid of all this body and HTML and everything. And we need to wrap this inside of our block statements. Alright, there we go. So now it works the same way, but you'll notice that it's also navigating to about. So let's go ahead and fix this real quick. So inside of our layout, so actually I just need to save that real quick. Alright, so my index is clearly saying, oh, you know why? It's because in our layout, we changed our layout to have about. I didn't mean to do that. Okay. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say block title. That way we can have unique titles. And now we can actually reference this entire block statement as well inside the index. So at the top we can say this, and then inside here we'll just say home, and here we'll say about, and then we also need to take the about out of basically I'm going to get rid of this entire header here. So now in order to differentiate between the pages, let's go ahead and just change this in the about real quick. So you have to mess around with the templates a little bit to get them situated the way you like, but you can see now on the about page we have the about, go back to the index, and you have different versions of the page and stuff like that. So that's how you end up using layouts and things to prevent a bunch of code duplication. So just messing with it in just a few minutes, we have a pretty good working example of how we can kind of minimize how each page should be structured in the application. You've also seen how to add them to our URLs and to our views. And the next part here, let's go ahead and add our first module. So now we're getting into some other core stuff here. So we're going to say python manage.py start app, and then we're just going to call this blog. So we're creating a blog app, and the way you want to talk about this is Django projects, or the entire project is the project, but projects are made of multiple apps. So now if we look at our project called book, we now have this blog that we just created. So let's take a look at what was created for us there when we said start app. if we look at blog, we have all these different things in here like migrations, the admin, we'll see in just a moment, the models file, tests, and views. And let's go ahead and let's talk about this for a moment. So the admin file allows you to add information about this app to your admin. Oh, my server's not running. So even though we have this book admin, you can see that there's nothing in the admin that talks about books, how to add a book or anything like that. So let's go ahead and do that right now. First things first, we need to create a model, and a model is actually how you design your database table. So you create a model and using a Python class, and that tells Django to build an actual database table that matches your Django model file. And the best way to actually learn this, and this is not something you're going to just be able to wrap your head around, it's just something you just have to do a bunch of times and eventually you'll start to understand it. But let's go ahead and do this. Let's do this right now. Let's open up our models file here, and you can see it says from DjangoDB import models. So that's the actual class that we're going to end up extending or subclassing. So if you check out my Python beginner series, you learn all about subclassing. Let's go ahead and create our class blog and use a capital here. And we subclass in in Python by saying models, and then so we're using models that got passed in, and we're going to say dot model. And make sure this is a capital M here. So this is going to use all of the built-in Django model stuff in order to actually build your database table. So what does a blog need? It always needs a title. And now we're going to also reference the models that got imported here as well. We're going to say dot, and you can see it's actually telling us some of the information that we can use. This stands for character field, and inside the parenthesis here we're going to give it a max length. So I think a title should not be more than 200 characters, and we also want the title to be unique. So that way there will be a database constraint, so you can't have duplicate blogs with the same title, because then you would have a hard time querying. Normally the blogs have some sort of image, right? So we'll go ahead and add that now. Now I'm going to add a max length of a very large amount. And this may seem crazy, but the reason why I'm going to do this is because I actually like to embed my images instead of actually having to mess with file paths and things like that. And I can show you guys that. Let me give you an example. On hipstercode.com, on these blogs, I find it so much easier to be able to blog when I can have a photo. And the photo, if you check out the actual photo here, if we inspect, you can see that the image is this humongous value here. But it's the embedded image, so it makes it so much easier for me just to embed the images and reference them instead of actually having to store the image on a server somewhere. So that's why I make it very, very large, so that way I can hold a very large image. It may not be the most proper thing in the world, but I don't really care. So here's our author, and we'll just say the same thing. In fact, I can just copy this. That way we can have authors, and then finally let's go ahead and just say description, or I'll call it description, but this will be the actual blog content. Here we're actually going to say something different. We're going to say text field, and because our blogs might be large, especially with embedded images, we're going to make this one 250,000. So that's a lot, I know, but whatevs. Blank equals true and null equals true makes it so that we can have empty values stored inside of the blog. Alright, so there's our blog. Let's go ahead and now create the database table. And in order to do that, let's press Control-C to stop our server. And we're going to go ahead and make sure you're in the folder where Python, the manage.py file is. And we're going to say Python manage.py make migrations. Actually, before we even do this though, we need to tell our Django project that we have this new blog app. So let's go into the settings, and under installed apps, we need to actually give it an argument where it says blog. Actually, I like to append them to the end down here. We're going to say just simply blog. That way Django knows that it has this new project. So when we run make migrations, it's going to look at this blog and it found it and it said, oh, okay, let me make my first migration. So now that you've made that migration, you need to actually migrate it. And this is what will actually create the database table for you. So you can see it says applying blog. So you're going to run those commands a lot. Make migrations and migrate. You make a change to your models PY file. First thing you do is make the migration, then you migrate it. If you run into some sort of error, it probably means that you didn't actually add your app to the installed apps in the settings file. But now that we've done that, let's take a look at something here. We want to be able to edit our blogs from the admin. So let's go ahead and look at the admin. And you can see that there's nothing here. But in order to actually be able to see our blogs inside of the admin, we want to go ahead and do some work here. So let's say from blog.models import, and we're importing the blog, the name of our class. So we imported this guy right here. So now we can use it inside of our admin. So we're going to say class, and we'll say blog admin. And then here we're also subclassing admin.model admin. So now what I want to do is I want to say list display equals, and this is a Python tuple. Once again, I talk about this in my beginner Python series. All right, and now we just need to register this, and we're going to say admin.site.register, and we're going to say blog and blog admin. Those are the two arguments that we're going to pass in. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead and run our server again. And if we go to our admin, you can see the blogs now shows up. So if I click on blogs, I can go ahead and add a blog right into my admin. So I can say this is our first blog. And then for now, let's go ahead and we'll just say copy. If I copy image, can I? No, that won't work. I was hoping I could just easily copy the value. Alright, 1 second. Alright, so I'm using this Trump image that I've already embedded. And this is beyond the scope of this tutorial, but there's a big old data embed image here. And we'll just say Chris Hawks. This is an article about nothing. Alright, now I'm going to save it. And you can see that it actually saved our database. So now it's like, oh, okay, this is cool. So let's go ahead and add another one. And this one won't have an image. Actually, we'll use the same image. What the heck? Alright, so now we have two. And I want to show you a cool feature of our Django admin here. We can add a additional argument to this where we say search fields equals, and then we say title. So we can say search by title. And now by doing this, if we take a look at blogs, we get this extra search bar. So if I say testing, it's only going to find the blogs that match testing in the title. So that's pretty cool. Alright, so now that we've done that, let's go ahead and find out how do we actually reference our blog. So let's go ahead and create a URLs file within our blog app. So make sure our blog app is selected, and we're going to say urls.py. And inside of here, we need to import, we're going to say from django.config.urls import URL. And now, just like in our last URL patterns, it's going to be the same thing here. We're going to say URL patterns equals, and then we reference URL, and we use our regular expression. And here I want to just say a caret sign, and we're going to say blogs / and then $. And this is going to match. Once again, we need to import our views. So the same way we did it down here in our book. Let's go ahead and just copy this real quick. The same thing we did here. Let's go ahead and copy that real quick and go up to our blogs URL, paste that. And we're going to say from blog import views, and we'll just say blog views. That way we can reference it here. Blog views dot, we'll say blogs. And now that we have this URL pattern, we need to go ahead and create this endpoint inside of our views. So just like we did before, we're going to say define blogs request, and then we can even go back to our views here and just copy this, and we'll call this blogs. So now that we have this template, let's go ahead and go to our templates folder and create that. And we're going to follow this same pattern, just copy all this. And we'll create a new template called blogs.html. Paste all that in here. Change the title, just say blogs. And we'll change this to blogs. And we'll get rid of this part. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead and what we need to do now is we need to include the URLs for our blog into our main application here. So this is going to be something that's also a little bit tricky, not really tricky, but just hard to wrap your head around, I think. But hopefully we can get through it here. What I want to do is say URL, and just like all the other ones, we're going to say R. And then when I say forward slash, I'm going to say blog forward slash. And then here I'm going to say include. And this is the first time we've used include. And now I'm going to say I think I can pass in an R. I think I can do this, or I can say blog dot URLs. I don't remember. I'm sorry. I'm trying to remember. Make sure there's a comma here. All right, let's see if this works, or if this also complains about not being able to use a string anymore. Although it looks like in the example it shows you that way. In fact, I could have just copied that entire damn thing. All right, so now what this is saying is it's saying anytime you request blogs, use the blog's URL. So let's go ahead and try this real quick. And make sure the server's running. Okay, include is not defined. Okay, so it's already telling us there's a problem. That means we need to say include. So we also need to import include from the URLs. All right, I don't know what that message is telling us there. Let's try to do this real quick. Okay. Alright, so if we inspect the URLs for the blog, the reason why is we have a typo here, and if we looked at the error message, you can see that it was saying that it does not appear to have any patterns in it, and that's because of this typo for our patterns right here. So this needs to say URL patterns. Okay, so blog, and then so now if we go forward slash blogs, we can now get to the main blogs page. So now what I want to show you is actually how do we get to the individual blog to display information for those blogs that we wrote. And in order to do that, what we want to do is use this special regular expression that allows us to pass in a value to query our database. And this is where we're going to use I think it's called a look ahead assertion, but if you just copy this word for word, we're saying essentially what this is saying is it's saying grab the numerical value that we pass in order, and then send it to the blog view. And now this is going to be different from blog, so let me go ahead and create that real quick. So go ahead and copy this part. And we're going to take it, because this is just going to be called blog. But now what we're going to do is we're going to say blog ID. So we can actually get this numerical value that's passed in. And the reason why it works is because of this. This blog ID is the name of the value. This stands for an integer with regular expressions. So it'll be passed to here. And that way we can actually query our database by that actual ID. Now, one of the interesting things is that Django models, anytime you add a new blog to your application or anything to your models, it automatically adds an integer. So you can see this is the second blog we created, so it got assigned blog 2. The first one we created was blog 1. So you're always going to have this unique numerical value that you can query your database by, assuming you want to do it that way. And this is usually the way that I always do it. So in order to do that, though, we need to import blog from our model. So we're going to say from blog.models import blog. And now we can use it down here. We're going to say blog, and we're creating a variable equals blog. And we're going to say objects dot get ID equals, and then we're going to say blog ID. So now let's go ahead and pass down a different template. We're going to call it the blog template. And the third argument we're going to pass is a dictionary that has the value of our blog. So this is the variable that we're getting from the database, and it's going to be all the database information for the blog that gets queried, and it gets assigned this value, and this is the value that we're going to actually reference inside of our template. And once again, the best way to describe all this is to go through with an example. So if I go into templates, I'm going to create a new template for our blog.html, and similar to here, I'm just going to copy this and I'll paste this inside my blog. And now this is where it gets interesting, because I'm going to say, you know what, instead of this title here, we're going to reference the blog.title. So how does it know? Like inside these two curly braces, blog title is actually the title that's stored inside of our admin. And here's blog author. So let's go back down here real quick. And I could say h3 by blog.author. Alright, and now I can even say image source equals blog dot image, and we'll give it a width of like 500, height equals 300. And I'm going to do another HR here, and then we'll have our blog inside of a p tag. We'll just put our blog dot, I think we call it description. Alright, so now we have this template for blog, and it's going to end up getting passed in values, and we're going to reference the blog.title up here too, so that way it has a unique title for our blog article title. Alright, so now we're referencing this template, and let's go ahead and take a look at the app. So go to blogs. That takes us to this main blogs page. Now let's go ahead and put in 1. And that did not work. I want to restart my server real quick. So let me see what I did wrong here. Anytime you make this many changes, it's just you're bound to make mistakes. So that seems fine. Okay, I see why that is. It's because we don't have a comma. That sucks. I'm getting tired. I'm getting tired of this video is getting long, I guess. But we didn't have a title. I couldn't find the match. So now if we do blog 1, you can see it's querying the database. Now what happens if you put in blog 2? Well, it's going to use the same template and it's going to load the other blog. And if you had a separate image, then it would load that too. Now what if I said blog 3? This is where you end up throwing an error, and you don't want errors being thrown for blogs that might not exist anymore. So there's a built-in helper tool that we can use as part of our shortcuts under views, and we're going to put a comma after render, and we're going to say get object or 404. So we're going to change the way we query our database now, where we can say, instead of doing it this way, we're going to say get object or 404, and then we pass in the name of the model, which is blog, and then we say PK. PK stands for primary key. You could say ID or PK, it doesn't matter. But now, by querying it this way, though, we're never going to run into a situation where like we're throwing a 500 error. We're just going to simply return a 404 page not found. Now, one thing to note, though, is that you're not going to actually see that working when you have your settings mode in debug mode. So if we go to our settings file, it's in debug mode by default. So you're not going to see that working, unfortunately, but that is basically the proper way of querying your database, so that way you don't throw errors. Now let's go ahead and return all the blog objects on our blogs page here. So we're going to say blogs equals blog.objects.all, and we're going to pass down inside of our dictionary blogs and assign it the value of blogs. So this is just going to return all of our objects. So let's go ahead and see how do we deal with that inside of our template. So inside of the blog, we specifically said, hey, blog.author and all this other stuff, but when we're passing down a list of items, it doesn't work exactly the same way. So let's go ahead and see how this works. We can say, we need to do a for loop. So we're going to say for blog in blogs, and that's actually what we're passing down as blogs. Now we can say, and we always have to end our for statements. We'll say end for, and now we can say blog.title. So this will actually provide a list of all the blog titles now in our database. So let's go ahead and look at that. So we're going to say blog.blogs, and oh, okay, yeah, it just put them all on one line. All right, so if we wanted to be on separate lines, we could just say, put each one in an H1 tag. So now you can see that we're looping through each blog. Now, realistically, you would probably do something like this. You would say, we'll say put everything in a div. But basically, everything inside here gets repeated. So we could have a div here, and we'll say div, we'll give it the title, so we'll say blog.title. And obviously this is just a proof of concept type of thing. Blog.image. And we'll make it relatively small, width equals actually 150, I guess. Alright, and now we can say that's really it. In fact, we'll wrap this entire div in an anchor tag. That way when you click on it, it will take you to the blog page. So how do we do that? Well, we reference right here. We're going to say /blog /blog.id, and then another /. So now we're providing the anchor tag for each element in the list. So let's take a look at how this works. Alright, so you can't really read the text very well, but you can see now if we click on it, it will actually take us to this first blog. We go back, go here. Now let's go ahead and just, we can update our layout.html to take out the menu item where it says services, and we'll just call this blogs, and have it go to /blog/blogs. And for right now, we'll just take out contact because we don't need that either. So now if we look at this, click on blogs, it will take us to the blogs page. Click on the about, it takes us to the about page. Click on this, it takes us to the home page. Click on blogs again, click on this, takes us to that one. So anyway, a lot of information to digest there, but this is essentially how you get started into building a website that eventually looks like this. I know it's not quite, but this took months of effort of trying to get everything in. There's tons of stuff going on with this website behind the scenes that this tutorial can't possibly cover. But let me think. Here we are approaching almost an hour and a half on this video, so I think we've covered quite a bit with Django. Obviously, you would play with the CSS. You would not want to have this type of background and stuff over top of your blog images. There's all kinds of Bootstrap themes and everything that can help you out. But we pretty much touched on what I wanted to touch on here. I'm going to get rid of this background color real quick so you can read it a little bit better. But ultimately, you'd have to come up with your own style and everything of how you want everything to be displayed. There's all kinds of options that you have. And yeah, that is really it, guys. So that's where I'm going to stop this tutorial. I'm probably going to extend this depending on the type of feedback. If you guys upvote the video, maybe share it, maybe obviously like it if you would, and subscribe to the channel. If the video receives positive feedback, then I end up trying to do more with it. But if it doesn't, then I typically just kind of let sleeping dogs lie, because these things are time consuming. I try to help out, and if I feel like I'm not helping people out, then there's obviously no reason for me to continue on. But let me know what you guys think, and whether or not maybe make some suggestions on some questions that you might have or something for me to be able to extend this little working example. But I think this is a good spot right now to go ahead and stop for this this Django tutorial series. All right, thanks for watching, guys. Take care. Bye. Hey guys, so a lot of you asked me, how do I get my foot in the door to become a programmer? And I just want to take a moment to mention Dev Mountain Coding Bootcamp is a 12-week intensive course that focuses on the technologies of the here and now for web development. Some of the things that they're actually teaching in this 12-week course, it's geared to get you into the industry by focusing on things like jQuery, Node.js, React, Angular, how to use GitHub. So a lot of the things that you're going to need to do as a developer as soon as you start, they're going to be teaching you in this coding bootcamp. And the entire goal is to be able to get you into the industry within 12 weeks. So if you guys are interested in learning more information about Dev Mountain Coding Bootcamp, just check out the link in the description tab of this video. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.